Welcome back to another edition of Racing World. Here we are, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the classic pagoda building standing over there just in the distance from us, and it's practice for the 2025 Indy 500, the 109th running of the great race presented by Gamebridge, and boy oh boy, I think there's a lot of wild cards in the equation for this, that's for sure. Day one, very much affected by rain, a lot of rain in the area. Very warm though, very, very warm for this time of the year. I've had some of the coldest races on history here and some of the hottest. We could be in for a hot one this year, that's for sure. But rain was the big factor on the first day of practice. Very limited amount of track time for all the cars out there. And in the end, really the big talking point was Kylie Larson and the fact that he's racing this weekend in a NASCAR race in Kansas, and he's attempting to qualify here at the 500. So it was Kylie Larson we got to talk to first in the press conference.
Focused on Indy now. I before I left Kansas, Cliff and I talked, maybe if there was time on Saturday, during qualifying, we could get together and just talk about how their practice went and stuff like that, and get prepared for the race on Sunday. But yeah, I think it's nice that we are so kind of well organized over there that I can completely shut myself off from them for a handful of days to really try and learn this and get prepared for the 500. And because there's just a lot that's a little bit unfamiliar that you got to get refamiliarized with this week.
Well, Kylie Larson's a bit of a strange one to work out. He's very hard to read. He's very cagey, you might say. The answers sometimes are a little bit calculated, and sometimes the cross has been almost a little bit flippant. But we all know the guy can deliver on track, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Of course, he's got Kansas this weekend on Sunday, NASCAR race. So if he makes the top 12 or then the fast 6, it's going to be the scenario of does he stay or does he go. Tony Kanaan comes into that equation. We'll have more on that in a little bit. But we moved on to the second day of practice, which was Wednesday. Rain again in the air, halted practice on and off all afternoon. In the end though, we started to see some cars play their hands. One of them of course was the defending champion trying for the three-peat, and that was Joseph Newgarden. This wasn't necessarily a surprise. Will Power was up there with him again for the second day in a row. Dixon was there as well. But Newgarden there was an irk of, we're on the game here, and we got to talk to him in the press conference as well that evening.
Yeah, the great thing about the open test the last 2 years is that you get this big head start coming into the month. And, if you're fortunate enough to show up with a pretty good car and get that dialed in the test, then you don't have a lot of work to do by the time we get to this week. I feel like we got on top of the hybrid pretty quickly so far. This is only a certain set of conditions that I've felt. If it gets much hotter, say it's 85, 87, and the track temp shoots through the roof at 120, 125, I think that changes the condition and feel of the car. So I'm still open-minded that we don't have everything checked, but the early signs of where we're at, I think is great. I think we're in a really good window. My car feels fantastic, but that's only one piece of the puzzle.
Newgarden, I don't think you can count out of this one. He's won it twice and going for the three-peat, the first driver to ever do that. It will be an interesting scenario should it play its way out of there. Chevy, I think at the moment, slightly on the backhand over Honda, but again, very hard to tell. A lot of games being played in practice this year. We won't really know until we see qualifying on Saturday local time here. Another person who we saw on day 3, bit of a hometown favourite from Noblesville, Indiana, just about 40 minutes up the road from here, Connor Daly in the Junkos Hollinger Racing entry. And Connor's a very likeable character. He speaks his mind, but one thing that we've seen from their cars this year, him and Stingray Rob, is they've got some speed. They've definitely got some speed. Connor's not afraid to go fast around here. And again, on the end of day press conference, we had the chance to hear from Connor Daly.
Seeing last year a car that was in the first 3 runs never had to run the rest of the day. I think it was Kevin Simpson or someone ran really early and just literally never ran again the rest of the day. So I think the early draw is for sure very important. And with the way the tires are going to dig, I think with the heavier car, I think that's also going to be more important. So and it depends on the wind, it depends on the sun, and it depends on the air and the humidity. So it'll be interesting. But I would love, we're all crossing our fingers for that early draw.
Well, Daly adding a lot to that team. I think he's a valuable part of the equation. Stingray Rob no slug either, but Daly is very fast around here, always has been fast and very confident, gets a lot of hometown support. Of course, his stepfather, Doug Bowles, is the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and IndyCar now, so got a bit of a fan base going there. But Connor could be in the mix. We saw him start to play a bit of a hand last year, so I think in that last quarter of the race he'd be one that you'd have in your sweepstake because you just don't quite know. So he's one to watch. Now, we talked of it a little bit earlier on. The chances are if Larson makes the fast 6, not saying that he will actually, but if he was, the scenario comes, does he stay on Sunday to do that, or do they bring in, under the new rules, the substitute driver? Well, the substitute driver completed the refresher course on Thursday morning. A 2-hour session was blocked out for TK himself, a one-time winner of the race, and he got to go back in the car, handing over from his role as the team principal of the McLaren team now, and back in the driver's seat with Larson actually on the pit wall, coaching him a little bit as well. So we got to hear from TK about his desire to be back in the car or whether he's happy in his new role.
My retirement, the whole month, it was really well, but it was really special. To be honest, I think that my biggest fear then was how much I was going to miss. And I think the experience with not just the fans, my family, my friends, and probably put a lot into, like, I don't want to spoil that. So I say that, and I said that out of the car after 30 laps by myself, and the car was pretty good. So it was not a lot of effort, really just enjoying the speed. I'm not sure I want to start 33rd and try to pass everybody and suffer for 2.5 hours. So not really. I think, honestly, I was joking, but I have a huge responsibility right now with the team. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. I think I did go out on my own terms, and I'm very intense, as you know. So I'm fully focused on making this team one of the best teams in IndyCar for the standards that everybody thinks about us and myself. So it was cool, but I'm okay. I'm really I was joking. I don't have the need to go back in the race car.
Only time will tell now whether we see TK in that car on Sunday. I have my doubts somehow because I don't think Larson's going to make the top 6. But, stranger things have happened and it's only Friday, so you never know. Onwards, of course, to Fast Friday. The teams get the extra boost that they'll have during qualifying. Both Honda and Chevy supplying that extra boost, so everyone's on a level playing field there. I think Honda have the slight upper edge at the moment. There's a bit of a vibe there, but saying that, all 3 Penske cars have been very quick, including New Zealand's own Scott McLaughlin, who was very, very quick when the track got underway on Friday afternoon. Very high temperatures, very hot, wind building, storms forecast for 5 p.m. local time on Friday itself. So teams keen to get a bit of track running in before maybe the weather changes. Not sure what we're in for that first day of qualifying on Saturday. Everyone will be keen to get a run in. Chances are it's going to be a lot cooler than what it is now. It's in the early 30s. Should drop down to the mid 20s. The wind will be a big factor. We should see maybe a tailwind down the back straight and a headwind going down the main straight. So it will play a big game. But the other factor, of course, this year for qualifying as well is the hybrid. And I got to ask Scott Dixon those very questions about how the hybrid is going to come into play in qualifying and in the race.
Welcome. Good to see you. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks very much. Scott, this is primarily at you, but the other drivers may contribute to it as well. Just with the added hybrid scenario this year, particularly here, are we going to see a different type of race play out in terms of deployment during the race when you're in traffic or not in traffic? Is that actually going to be a factor in the race, do you think?
I think it definitely adds some variables. I think even in qualifying, I think there's more, things that you can mess up. As far as determining the race outcome, it could really play a big part, especially if you go too early, you're sitting out front, you could be a bit of a sitting duck, and especially if everybody's kind of recharged and ready to go behind you. So the sequence of the last 2-3 laps could really alter how it plays. Also opens up the issues of clipping or maybe options where the hybrid's not going to be working as it should as well. So we've seen that in other races. So I think you've really got to try to understand when to go and where to go and what's going to be the best play out. The other thing too is with cautions that we've seen close to the end of the race, kind of changes that as well. So I think the biggest thing that we've probably all learned so far is that you've got to be ready for change is probably the biggest thing. But I think it could ultimately change how the end of the race plays out.
and then say coming down the straight here, do you notice the difference if you're in traffic and you use some of that harvested energy? Is it a noticeable gain that you get from it?
Yeah, if it's working correctly, it's definitely a big gain. The issue is that everybody else has it too, right? And strategies typically kind of end up being the same, and especially in the scenario of race running, you're kind of recharging most of the time, whether you're going into 1 or 3, depending on the traffic and how that works as well. So you're using it quite a lot. But the way that the energy is almost maybe too much. I think if you could only really deploy once a lap, I think it could change it a little bit better. To whereas now I think everybody's kind of deploying out of 2 out of 4.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much.
Well, not much else to report really from Fast Friday. Giffen Simpson having a big impact on the wall very early into the session, probably an hour and a half into the session. Conditions were quite hot, quite breezy. We're starting to see people trim these cars out, try and utilise the hybrid, the weight transfer in the corners, all sorts of combinations. But Simpson did a lot of damage, not only to the safer barrier, but to the car itself. Big job ahead for the Ganassi crew. Very, very unlikely they'll have a car out on track on Friday, so the first chance he'll get to be in a car will become Saturday morning in qualifying. So bit of a nervous night, I'd say, for Simpson before qualifying takes place. Rest of the day is pretty much how you'd expect it to play out. Team's been cagey. I think that we're in for a very, very interesting qualifying, a very different type of qualifying. We saw Dixon top the timesheets about 2.5 hours into the session, and what was interesting, unlike what we've seen in the past, his 4th lap was actually his quickest of a simulated qualifying run and not his first, and that was using hybrid technology to get him through. So driver strategy is quite a lot different, as you heard Scott say, so it'll be very interesting to see how that comes out. We'll feature qualifying in our next show, talk to all 3 Kiwis, Marcus Armstrong, Scott McLaughlin, and of course Scott Dixon, after they make their runs in qualifying tomorrow. Weather fine, of course. If not, it'll be Sunday. And to see their reaction. And then on Sunday, we'll get to see who takes out pole for the 109th running in the Indy 500. That'll be in our next show, our Monday New Zealand time, if you're a New Zealand viewer. And then, of course, next week, our race day, carb day show as well. So until then, from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, on behalf of already many Kiwis that are up here, I know that for a fact. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And we'll see you in our next show after qualifying.